She'll pick a title.
Oh, yeah, sure. Have you have any ideas?
Oh,
I
yeah.
do. So my job, my secret job, and my secret pleasure is to write down things that you said that would
Secret
make.
pleasures. Wait a minute. We didn't get, nobody got to. Wait a minute. We didn't get to talk about secret pleasures.
Oh,
Okay.
I know. You'll have to come back for another episode.
There you go. There you go.
You know I will.
Woo! All right. So I get to write down things that you've said that would make a good title, but you get to pick your favorite. Are you
Got
ready?
it. Mm-hmm.
And if you hear one you like, just say, yep, I'll put a star by it, and we'll pick from the starred ones at the end.
Okay.
We had no intention of buying a boat. Caweer's here. The first of a long line of champions. Me, oh my, oh, we're on the Ohio. There's always a storm. It boosted my man factor. We're gonna do this by, damn it. Is Madam having coffee?
That one.
Okay. I'll give you the last couple. I mean, ask Dale. Engaging, articulate, and smart, or what lays beyond familiarity and routine?
The last one or the first one I mentioned. Madam
All right.
having coffee. Either one of those is equivalent to me.
Did you have a favorite?
No.
Baz?
I like the coffee one.
All right.
Because I think it will work well, because what I'm trying to do is that I'm doing the Pee Wee Herman kind of thing in the video. So like when you hit the title, confetti explodes and I say episode title. So I literally highlight the moment. It's a Pee Wee Herman moment. So
all right. Welcome to season 6, episode 20. Is Madam having coffee? This is the Rope Podcast. I'm Ben Sebastian here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
hey.
And we're really glad you're here with us. Our guest today is Alexander Watson. The Harrises are strict teetotaling sabbatarian farmers, but Dale drinks. The Watsons are urbane, philandering, wanton alcoholics, but Alexander does not drink. These are but two of the myriad incongruities which bind their 30-year partnership together. Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you and your partner upended your lives and went on an adventure and then wrote an amazing book about it. Can you give us like the background of where that started?
Sure. The short story is that Dale and I, neither one of us were boaters, had any experience with boating, but we walked out of a really dreadful movie, so dreadful that we don't even remember what it was.
Oh my God.
And on a lark, I turned to Dale. I might as well have said, "Do you want to go cruise the lingerie counter at Macy's?" But instead, I said, "Would you like to go to the 2001 Dallas Winter Boat Show?" And because we had nothing else to do, he said, "Sure." And this was a time when we were both very busy, and so for us to have time together and for having a disappointing experience together in the movie, we were desperate to go do something. And so we went to the Dallas Boat Show, and we had no intention of buying a boat. It was a thing to do on a cold February day between a warm movie and then a warm exhibition hall to tide us over to dinner time was basically what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
So we walk through. We have no idea what we're looking at. We have no idea what we're doing there. No idea. And on the way out, I'm completely disgusted because my day off with my lover has been destroyed by one disappointment after another. And I hear from behind my back my name called, and that's unusual because usually I'm the one that wanders off. But Dale is the one that got waylaid, and he calls me back across the hall, and I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, what's for dinner?" I'm putting on my jacket, thinking, "What's for dinner?" And I go back and I look behind one of these great big mega yachts, and there is a makeshift breakout room like there are in exhibition halls where, the salesmen go and smoke and have a cup of coffee. And right there was a used boat board, used
Mhm.
boats for sale. And in the bottom right-hand corner was this grainy picture of oatmeal. If you looked at it really carefully, you could make out a boat. And this image had been pinned to so many boards over so long that it was perforated with pinpricks across the top margin. And he said, "Look at this." And I looked at it, it looked like oatmeal. Because all the other pictures on the board were bright blue, sunny days, crystal clear waters, these white boats had been scrubbed within an inch of their lives, and it was all just sweetness and light. And here was this picture of oatmeal. What it was a boat pushed out on a foggy, stormy day, gray seas, gray skies, and pushed out in front of a gray corrugated steel boathouse wall, and a picture snapped before it was dragged back into its slip by its anchor rope, its rope.
Mhm.
And I said to Dale, we should look at that as a curiosity. And 2 weeks later, we had an opportunity to go look at it as a curiosity, and we were smitten.
Aw.
What we saw was a complete, total, neglected wreck. It was a 1955 Chris Craft Corsair, which is a cabin cruiser, 45 feet long, that had been left for dead for 2 years with the spider poop and the dust and so forth. And we
Spider
bought it.
poop?
Huh? Yeah, spiders do poop. Spiders do poop, and they poop
It must
black.
take a long time to create a manure bag out of it. I'm just saying.
Well, it's because they eat blood. It's jet black,
Oh,
and it
okay.
stains fiberglass boats. It's the bane of fiberglass boaters. But with a
Huh.
wooden boat, the decks are varnished. It wipes right off. But nobody had for 2 years,
Sure.
and we were smitten. And so we bought it, having no idea what we were buying or what we were going to do. And we started restoring it. It took us 2 years to restore. And then we decided that we were tired of putt-putting around an inland lake in North Texas. And so I said to Dale, let's take a river trip, thinking this would be a summertime thing to do. Let's take a river trip.
Mhm.
And we hauled the boat out of the Lake Texoma, and we splashed it in the Arkansas River. And that's where the story of the book starts, is what we thought was going to be a summertime junket, June, July, August, right?
Mhm.
From Oklahoma to Cincinnati, turned out to be a 15-month odyssey because there were setbacks and delays. Both of Dale's parents died in the process, and so it was quite an opportunity, because Dale and I afforded this by selling everything we owned, and we had no reason to stay in Dallas. It was my hometown, but Dale is a native Wisconsinite, and so when I said let's take a river trip, he said we can, but we have to settle in a northern state. So we decided on Cincinnati, Ohio, because it is as south as we could be and still be in a northern state.
Mhm.
So that's what we did. And the book is about the people that we met along the way.
Very cool.
Because what we came from was Oaklawn, Dallas, Texas. And Oaklawn, Dallas, Texas in 2008 was just transitioning to gentrification. Before that, it was the gay ghetto. In the middle of the summer, boys would drive around naked in open cars, cruising in the middle of the day, and muscle men would strut down in something a little bit more than a G-string and go-go boots. And that part of town was pretty much left lawless, and it was just social misfits. And
Mhm.
so, but the developers figured out that it was an excellent location, particularly as the city got more congested, and so it got gradually more gentrified, until now it's not even recognizable as the gay ghetto that Dale and I knew. But that's where we came from, and without having any idea where we were going or what we were going to do or what we were going to encounter, because I was thinking summer vacation, not 15 months in
Right.
rural America. And what we first landed in was Sallisaw, Oklahoma, which is a lovely town. It was the nearest marina we could get to that had navigable water, but we were used to marinas with with 1,000 slips, and nightclubs and service bays and retail outlets and professional management. And what we landed in was a little wide spot in the river, which was 100 slips, and it was run by a man and his wife, dear people, Rhoda and Alan Carpenter. And it was all kind of just catch as catch can. And, a ballpoint pen with special delivery and overnight took 1 week. And so we had to learn to acclimate ourselves to that kind of life. And coming from a very urbane, very erudite, I was raised by decorator fags and drama and opera queens, as I had said. So going from that to corn farmers was quite a kind of a shift for all parties involved. I mean, for us and for them. And that's where the adventure really lies, is not where we went and what we did, but the impact, the people we met and the impact they made on us.
Mm-hmm. Can you share a couple examples? And if you need to protect names, we understand. But I'm curious, because the story like that, I mean, it's an ultimate fish out of water story. And
yes, it is.
Pardon the water reference.
Quite literally.
Quite literally.
But by the same token, you were building bridges. You were building some amazing bridges. And, if you got a couple you can share, I would love to hear about it.
There is one that's actually in the book. The difference between the boat had to be reconfigured for river travel. The difference between lake travel and river travel is a lake is usually groomed, mm-hmm. meaning that the shoreline is dressed, the underwater hazards are removed. On a river's a river, and so those hazards can't be removed. I mean, you cannot keep that something that's constantly changing consistent. Mm-hmm. And there's current, which changes. There's water level, which changes. There's wind. And so you have to have, and you go miles and miles and miles without anybody being around. On a lake, there's always somebody passing by, and the Lake Texoma is ringed by service outlets. So all you have to do is dial the phone and say, I'm dead in the middle of the water, come get me. And anybody will. Mm-hmm. On a river, you're on your own. So you have to make sure that your vessel is operable. So we didn't invest a lot of money in the boat before we went on the river, because if she is a wooden boat, she can fall apart on the road just from the vibrations. And so we weren't sure she was going to make it. So to make a long story short, our first destination was Sallisaw, Oklahoma, and the marina was Applegate Cove, and it was run by Rhoda and Alan Carpenter. And they were West Texas oil field workers. They were roughnecks, and they somehow got this gig in Oklahoma. And it was 2008, and there wasn't any money. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any. And so Alan had pretty much figured out, when we had asked him to bid on transporting the boat and putting us up in his shop, if Alan had pretty much figured out we were going to be the business of the season. And so he pulled us out on Memorial Day of 2008, and the boat made it over the hard just fine. And we started, and they jacked it up and put it in the shop, and I started doing hull work on her, while Dale started contracting with the mechanical work. And the marina is so close knit that people were expecting us to be there. They were expecting to arrive on opening day, which is Memorial Day, and they were expecting to see a fabulous 1955 Chris Craft motor yacht, something that would be coming out of Hyannisport, mm-hmm. or James Bond. And what they saw was an empty slip. And so they were curious about where we were and had we come. I, on the other hand, am across the cove in the shed, banging away. So they can hear that we're there, but they want to see us. They want to meet us. They've heard about us. Mm-hmm. And so they sent a contingent over of 3 guys, the 3 biggest boat owners in the marina, and they come by, and I am sweaty and dirty and bloody, and I'm folded up in the bilge, and they come around, and there's a gaping hole in the side of the boat where I'm working, and they poke their heads in. In this course of conversation, they ask me about me and my wife, and I talk about he and we, and we bought the boat together, and I may have gone so far as to say we sleep together. Probably not, but they got the idea.
Kevin, this is a man.
What? That we were talking about careers here. And they beat an exit. I mean, it was like, bam, they were out of there. They were in their Suburban. Bam, 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 3 doors slow. And they go screaming around the cove on the gravel road. And they arrive in the marina, and I can see them in their Suburban come down the hill towards the water, and they stop just short of the water, and they're out of that truck, and they are in their boathouse, and there is a confab in the boathouse about what has happened. We have homosexuals in our boathouse. So they get pitchforks and boat hooks and whatever, and they go up, and they were going to go talk to the manager, Alan. Alan's dying of brain cancer at this time. And he's laid out on meds on his Barca lounger on his porch with an oscillating fan and a smoking cigarette. Mm. And he's pretending like he's asleep because he knows what's happened. He saw them go over. He knows what's going to happen. And this mob comes up to the porch, and they say, "Alan," and he pretends not to hear them. And they insist, "Alan." And Alan wakes up and plays like he knows. He's like, "Hey, everybody's here. What's going on?" Right? Plays like he has no idea. He's no wiser. And they start campaigning to throw us out. They start by, Alexander, by saying, "Alan, there are these two queer that we don't want no queers in this marina." And Alan's like, "Okay." And they say, "Alan, what are you going to do about it?" And he says, "I don't know. What do you want me to do about it? Put up a sign?" And they say, "Alan, that there are two damn queers over there in that boat, in that shop yard." And Alan straightens up his chair and he says, "You know what I know is that there's one guy over there working on his boat, and his partner is in my office with my wife ordering parts, spending money. And what I know is that their money is good and their money in the bank, and that a lot of you guys owe me something. So these guys stay." And that was the first introduction to the kind of homophobia that we were going to experience and have to deal with. But it was also the first champion we had, the first of a long line of champions that we had on the river. Alan was the first. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that because of that championship, because of his endorsement, we pretty much were set on the Arkansas River.
Wow.
So it's that kind of heroism that I wanted to convey in River Queens, because particularly in the past administration where we're all at each other's throats, I wanted to tell a story about how, we're really not all that different. We're really not all that different.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you were there with your tools up to your elbows in grease and working on the boat.
Well, and, whatever else we were, to tell you the truth, whatever else they perceived what we were, and I have to tell you, we did not wear our pinky wings and call each other girl on the dock. I mean, okay, but whatever else we were, we have a good looking boat. River people can identify with vessels, and so when you have a vintage motor yacht in good repair, they kind of know what that takes, and so there's a demonstration of prowess there. Once you get some river miles under you, you don't just go putt in the river, but you're actually going point to point. Then that gives you a lot of cred on the river. And we also had a good looking dog. We had a Dalmatian named Doris Fay. And she was our goodwill ambassador on shore and our morale officer, on the boat. If things got heavy on the boat, Doris Fay was there to kind of clear his throat. And she had to pee always. So the first thing we did was tie up the boat and then take the dog for a walk. And in so doing, she was our introduction to a lot of the locals.
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think because we spend so much of our lives coming out, and I think that a lot of it is, it's all based in fear. They just, because they don't know people like us, they immediately run to their fearful pitchforking, rather than really finding out about the people that are there. I mean, yeah, it's really kind of, it is a fascinating foray. I mean, I know there's been a couple of other people who have done. There was a film partnership. I don't know if they were together as a couple. I can't quite remember, but they did it with a motorhome and traveled up through the center of the country.
Yes.
And I think it's called Where Are We? I think that's the name of the movie. But yeah, it's along the same lines, and it's not until people meet us, get to know us, they know we all bleed red, they know we all have to deal with spider poop on a boat, the commonalities are so many.
So after a champion like Alan has stood up for you, did the locals extend an olive branch, or did they just kind of leave you alone?
Oh no, we were in. We
Okay.
were they extended we were in the first 6 weeks were a little tough,
Mhm.
but we had to go do some paperwork in a nearby town in a little bitty Oklahoma town, and we had to go do some paperwork. We had to register the boat, which in Texas is a check and a stamp. In
Okay.
Oklahoma, you have to go to a government office, and so everybody's in there doing their government business, right? And in the course of conversation, the woman helping us said, "These guys are up from Texas out," and somebody just out of the blue said, "Oh, are you the ones that have that wooden boat up from Texas that Alan brought in?"
Nice.
And so, yes, and so they started talking about the boat, and because of Alan's illness and imminent death, everybody had some sympathy for whatever Alan was doing, and Alan had extended this opportunity to us,
Mhm.
and so it gave us a lot of cred. So yes, and that was very helpful because as we had as our stay in Sallisaw, which was supposed to be about a month, continues to go out to about 5 months, then we start making connections with our vendors, and we always have in our pocket Alan Carpenter. There's always, Alan sent us, or we're down at Alan's, and so it was that entree that he established for us. Then when we finally got underway, the first person that we meet is the lock master at Lock 15 on the Arkansas River, which is right next to the marina. So they know Alan, they know Alan's family, they know Alan's condition, and Alan has died by this point. And
Mhm.
they know that we're fixing to get on our way. They know that we're ready to go. And so finally, when we get to go, it's like, well, you finally got here. You finally get to go. And the lock masters kept tabs on us going down the river, and the barge drivers kept tabs on us going down the river. So they had an idea of where we were going, and how long it would take us to get someplace. And so if we were ever overdue, they'd ask us, "Where have you been?"
Hmm.
Because that network extended down the Tennessee, down the Cumberland, and up the Ohio River. Once you have a distinctive boat, whether it's full of queers or lepers, it doesn't matter. Once you have a vessel that they can pick out of any other vessel, then they take an interest, and they all take an interest in everybody's safety. That was one of the things about the river that was so fascinating, is that everybody is invested in everybody else's safety.
That's
And
amazing community.
Mhm.
it is. It is, but it only extends 500 yards off the shore. Once you get 500 yards off the shoreline,
Mhm.
then it's that river culture dissipates into the world we know.
Okay, so like I have the burning question in my head. At any time, did either you or Dale have the impetus to do a Priscilla Queen of the Desert moment on top of the boat?
I don't. I saw that film years ago. So I saw that, and I saw With Love to Julie from Julie Newmar, but I don't remember the incident you're talking about.
When it's the silver high heel with the opera
Oh,
playing.
the full drag.
Yeah.
The full drag. Okay. There were moments that Dale and I shared on the boat that were plainly out of sight of anyone. That were those kinds of moments in our own way. Now, did we have full drag with us? No. The fullest drag I ever had was a pair of bib overalls. But there was.
Well, they could be blinked out.
Of course it can.
Of course.
What is it? What separates us from the animals is our ability to accessorize. And the first time I ever heard that was Steel Magnolias, and
Okay.
and I believe that Olympia Dukakis delivered that line.
Yes.
And I can't. She was Clarie. I can't remember that character's last name, but it was because my mother specifically, and then my parents together, were in the interior design business, and accessorizing was what they made their most profit on. It was like, oh my God, somebody actually has put that into words.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Well, it's interesting because I saw another play by the same playwright, and he was gay, and so he had.
No.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. But it's interesting because you see his other plays, and they all have that same commonality. There is that definite queer line
Mhm.
through the women, and I remember that the director, when I was helping out with that play, I remember him saying that one of the things that he loved about this playwright's works was that it was something for everyone, and it was through the strong voice of the women in his life that gave him that courage to put this to paper and to actually strive to put this out. So, I always admire, when we get quote, and it's funny, all gay men know those lines. I mean, it's something universal,
and we all know
it's in the Book of Judy.
It's like we all know Golden Girls, and we all know episodes almost by their numbers of Golden Girls. And I don't think a gay man has to actually have seen Golden Girls. I think it is just it's
so embedded in the culture.
It's part of the genetic marker. It's like we've mutated, so that part of the genetic marker is Golden Girls. What you said about the women reminded me of the film, the women. And
Vance hasn't seen it, and I've got to get him introduced to that movie.
Oh, well, okay.
Oh, no, that's much too expensive for me. Nonsense, my dear. Pretty girl like you with all the rich men that float in here. I'm afraid when they come to this counter, they have other women on their minds. I shouldn't think you'd let that disturb you.
We have a running bit from the women that's a signature part of our show.
Which is it?
It's the where it goes bong 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 bong. And she says, "Oh, what's that?" She said, "The bum's Russian melody, dear." That's our signature. It's closing. Bum's Russian melody, dear.
Okay, who could have?
If you notice what's above Vance's shoulder, it's Roz Russell's.
Oh, yes, I do see that.
Life is a Banquet.
I do see that. Okay, well, so who could direct that other than George Cukor?
Exactly.
Nobody.
I know.
The closest would be Minnelli.
Yeah, Vincent Minnelli.
Vincent Minnelli, but it would still get too Gigi. I mean, it's still right. It would still be so.
Oh, it had to be Cukor. It had to be.
It had to be Cukor that did that. So back to the question about the Queen of the Desert moment. Dale and I were at Green Turtle Bay, which is the marina on the Tennessee River before it turns into, it's the marina on the Cumberland River, excuse me, before it goes down into the Ohio. And it's just this little stretch of Cumberland River. But we're at Green Turtle Bay, and before we go through the lock, we want to know what to expect as far as water conditions, because if it's full of debris, which is boat word for trash, like floating logs and appliances, and I mean, if it's just full of stuff because of the floods, then we don't want to. We're safe for it to hang out at Green Turtle Bay for a week or two, right? So we call up the lockmaster and at Smithland, and he says I'm running 36 feet and it's fairly clean, and we don't know what that means. So, and this particular leg of the trip is something that has to be done in one day. I'm not going to get into the technicals about it, but it has to be done in one day. You have to get from Green Turtle Bay to Golconda, Illinois in a day, and there's 2 locks involved, and it's a strenuous time. And so we want to know exactly what we're getting into so that we know that we could make it in this day. And when the lock opens up onto the Cumberland River, it is like a flume ride. It is like being at Disneyland on the flume ride, and you're going lickety split down the river. So there's not going to be any problem about making our destination. And I am on the bow doing some kind of deckhand thing, and we're dolphins in the water going down this river. And when we finally make it to the Ohio, which is our last river, it's our last transfer, we turn upriver for the first time. We do a Queen of the Desert thing because it's the final stretch. I mean, and I think, and I got on the internet and I said, "Mio Mayo, we're on the Ohio," and it was our big Nelly moment.
I can picture it. You turn the speaker, and then Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive."
We thought no one was there, but you were there.
I think we'd have to take away your toaster oven if you didn't.
Right?
Yes,
we'll
probably.
Take this back. Thank you very much.
So, having grown up on the Wisconsin River, I also know that there are issues and problems, and you alluded to some of them. That sometimes the boat can hit something in a river that you would never expect in a lake. Did you have any incidents of either that or just weather that just attacked out of nowhere?
Yes. Dale Harris. uh, the joy of this boat is that Dale and I do not have overlapping talents. Um, I enjoy doing deckhand sorts of things and taking care of the woodwork and the woodworking part of the boat. Dale enjoys the mechanics, the propulsion, and the navigation. So he is primarily the captain, and I am primarily the deckhand, and that just falls to our natural talents and interests.
Mhm, mhm.
And Dale is a extremely conscientious captain. So no, we didn't have an emergency because he was so well prepared.
Nice.
We did have emergencies like family members suddenly croaking,
Sure.
and having to waylay the trip and go deal with the burial and all like that. And that was actually we almost, after it was 20 years, we've been together 20 years at that point. Over that is what we almost got divorced over,
Hmm.
and that's in the book. Um, but there was one storm. There's always a storm in a boat book. There's always a storm. There was one one storm where we were waylaid for traffic at Toad Suck Ferry Lock on the Arkansas River, and those locks are not double chamber, and so we were waylaid while they took a barge apart, pushed it through the lock, put it back together, and so we were 3 hours, which is a
Mhm.
while, and there was a storm coming down. It was a tropical depression coming up from the Gulf, and lots of water, lots of rain, lots of wind. And we finally get into the lock, and the lock master asks us, "Where are you going?" And we said, "Little Rock. We're trying to get to Ray's, but we may have to." And he said, "You ain't going to get to Ray's." He said, "You'll get to Little Rock Yacht." And he said, and we said, "They don't return our calls." And he said, "No, I don't suspect they do, but that's where you're going to end up. But you cannot anchor on the river tonight. You cannot. And
Hmm.
so you have to find shelter." And so and we get through the lock, and then the bands cars of the tropical depression come, and so we were getting inundated and blown all over the river, and the way we landed at Little Rock was pretty much I just jumped the void and got somehow onto the deck, onto the dock from the deck of the boat, and I looped a line around a cleat, and the boat just came and slammed into the dock, and here we were. And thank
Mhm.
God we were tied up, and we just squatted in some empty slip,
Wow.
and that was the most dramatic. Were we ever imperiled? No. Was it
Mhm.
tense? Yes, primarily because the rain was so hard we couldn't hear each other scream.
Wow.
So you had your own little personal Cape Fear moment.
Yeah, 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 and those the kinds of incidents drew us more together as
Right.
a team and as partner, as lovers, than I think almost anything else could.
Mhm.
Barring children, and I don't have any experience with that. And but it also um, it boosted my man factor. I mean, I really got the more we had to handle things like that, the less I was self conscious about being less than because I'm homosexual.
Right.
Right.
It was
Put
like,
your you put your hands on your hips and thrust your chest out, and all the rhinestones went flying.
you know,
I'm a manly man.
that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. And I never had a very convincing second floor slouch, but it's gone now, and it may be just due to age.
But no, you're right. I mean, there is something very empowering about a series of small successes, one after another.
Hmm.
And you have to prove yourself in every single one of them. You're absolutely right.
Mhm.
Well, and there wasn't any opportunity to say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore,
True.
because I have a 12-ton asset that I can't just leave.
Mm-hmm.
and I have a dog and I have a relationship, and so it's like, okay, well, we're gonna do this, by damn it.
Right. No. Yep. There you go.
There was one opportunity when Dale and I had left Sallisaw and we were in Ozark, and it's a beautiful scene. I think we were out in the dinghy just to do a row around a backwater, and Dale and I had to have a serious, come to Jesus meeting about what route we were going to take, because my ego wanted to take the Mississippi. My ego wanted to go down the Arkansas, up the Mississippi, and up the Ohio. But the Mississippi doesn't have convenient services to the shoreline, because the Mississippi is bound by floodplain rather than dikes. And so it's not really a recreational
There are
river.
lesbians there?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else about the book you want to share with folks?
Yes. It was never an intention of mine to be an author. And I am an author because in the process of taking this trip, our friends, before when we bought a wooden boat, our friends kind of thought we'd lost our minds. When we said we're going to pick her up and we're going to put her on the river trip and we're going to take a river trip, they knew we had lost our minds. And then, so to comfort them, we sent periodic emails. They weren't regular postings, but periodic emails that said, this is what we're doing. We're waylaid, we're set back, we can't get parts, or whatever the tragedy was that day, whatever had to be over. But we're happy and we're not killing each other, and we can't wait to get on the river. If we ever get on the river, blah 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 blah. And I wasn't trying to make masterpieces. What I was trying to do was to convey to the people who were concerned about us, which was about 150 people on the list, and people we picked up along the way who were interested in our travels. And it was more of an informative, not even a newsletter. It was just a blog. It was an early blog without even knowing it was a blog.
Sure.
And when we had finally arrived safely in Cincinnati and we transferred the household and like that, each one of them pretty much said, you really need to write a book. You really need to put this down in a book. Okay, well, I didn't have any ambition to write a book. And I kind of knew that being able to write a nice email as far as a book, turning it into a book, is kind of like opening a restaurant, because you can set a pretty table.
I can feel that.
You know?
You got TV dinners in the fridge, but God damn it will look like Downton Abbey.
Tuxedo the dog. So, and so I worked on it, and I kind of half-assed worked on it. And then finally I got something good enough that I was willing to invest in. And this is over years. I get a manuscript I'm willing to invest in, and I find a professional editor, a developmental editor. And that's when that book really got interesting, because my editor, John Baskin, lives and works an hour outside of Cincinnati. And so he read my stuff and he said, we need to have lunch. And he sat down with my manuscript, and there's notes all over it, the first page. And we're having lunch, and I'm thinking, we're never going to get past the first page. And in fact, we never did get past the first page, because he had to say things to me like, okay, Alexander, what you need to do, this was lesson number 1. What you need to do is you need to write a line. And then you need to write a second line. And the two have to have something to do with each other. And the more we talked, the more into the craft of writing we got, to the point that I had no idea what he was talking about. And I would just try to memorize what he was telling me, so that in the drive home, I could replay it in my head and try to figure out what he was talking about. And that started a process of back and forth editing that eventually came River Queens. But it was 2 years from that first lunch to press time.
Wow.
Before it got into. And so I bring this up because the subsequent experience of having produced a book and then having marketed a book, so that I can meet people like you and interact with people like you and tell my story with people like you, is a wonderful unexpected byproduct. It's a wonderful benefit, because it's one thing to go off on a boat and to go out into the world and present yourself to the world. It's another thing to have produced something like a book, and then that gives you the excuse to engage people who are podcasting or radio or whatever they're doing, book reviewers and bloggers, and it is an entree into a whole different kind of world that isn't a river world at all, but is just as fascinating because it's almost as diverse.
Hmm. Well,
That's
I'm glad
wonderful.
you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have heard, people who said, I was born, I knew I was an author when I was born. I was born an author, and I didn't have that
I came
experience.
out of the room scribbling away.
Right. Well, we've heard of those people,
Yes,
and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and bless their hearts, and I mean, thank God they exist. But I didn't have that experience, and I also listen to podcasts and my colleagues talk about how they write a book because they want to be the next J.K. Rowling, and they want to have a movie deal, and they want to have this, and and I want to have all that too.
Mhm.
But they leave out all of the building part. They leave
Right.
out all the creative part, all the building part. I mean, yes, I want to be rich and famous, and I want to have Tom Cruise's, mansion in Colorado. I want to do all that, sure. But nobody told me about all the getting there part, which I think is fun.
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, are you ready for some get to know you questions?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
T-
All right.
Take it away, Baz.
So this is our year of getting to know thyself. So in that vein, what habit has mattered to you the most in getting through the last year or so?
I've had to be very disciplined about 1 foot in front of the other. 1 foot in front of the other. Because the pandemic disrupted all of our lives differently.
I was just going to ask. Yeah. I mean,
Because it impacted all of us differently, I've had to, well, it's just been the past year has been a constant process of reassessment, because what I was used to doing, my usual routine, isn't available. For example, the Y's closed, the YMCA is closed. Okay, what am I going to do with myself? All right. But more importantly, I've had to remember that everybody else is going through it too.
mhm.
So just because I'm inconvenienced or I have to think of another way doesn't mean that the rest of the world is going on normally. It isn't just about me. And so I've had to be very disciplined about let's just what's the next indicated step.
Right. Okay. I get it. All right. Well, what's one thing you did more of in 2020 that you enjoyed and will continue to do?
Can I tell you that I never thought I could ever spend more time with Dale Harris than I already did before the pandemic?
Yes, you may.
Well, then I shall. I never thought, I mean, Dale and I are almost cleaved at the hip. We do everything together.
Mhm.
We share a car, we share a bed, we share a cell phone. That really freaks people
A
out.
toilet,
Yeah, we draw the line at toothbrushes, but that's about it.
Right.
Okay. And so the pandemic has thrown us together, and we have been in close quarters on the river trip for 15 months. Okay.
Mhm.
But this is where, when we were in lockdown, we were with each other always with no anticipation for relief. And I just adored it. I just adored it.
It's when in those situations, it's when you realize you made the right choice with who you're with.
Yeah.
Certainly that's true. Yes.
Yeah. I went through a bout with cancer just before all of that hit. And, so I was with my husband. I wasn't working. I was with him the whole time I was dealing with it. And we went right into COVID shortly thereafter. And it was like, people like, how do you do it? How do you? I've been doing it for the last 3 years. This is old hat. Nothing's new has happened in my life.
Did you have treatments during COVID? I mean, did you have cancer?
Luckily I had all of that prior to COVID. So literally my recuperation, my climbing out of that chemo hole, and mine was horrendous, but that climbing out of the chemo hole happened and it was finishing off, tapering off to where I was getting my what they call NED status, no evidence of disease.
Yes.
I see the crew cabin is bringing New Year. refreshments. Photobomb. I think we saw the captain.
You did. Madam requires her mid-morning coffee.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
That's what
I didn't know it was tea time. I'm sorry.
Well, this is the outbreak of this is not the outbreak. This is an outcropping, or this is something that came out of COVID for us. We start referring to each other as Madam.
Nice.
Is Madam having coffee? When is Madam having breakfast? When's Madam's breakfast going to be served? And we've started calling our wraps furs. They're not, but we call them that anyway.
One can dream.
I look ridiculous in a fur. Well, some people can carry them off beautifully.
What the fuck?
I mean, they look like they're, they drape properly, and everything about them looks like. But there are a lot of people that a fur is just the most unflattering thing in the world.
Looks like you're trying to be something you're not.
And it has nothing to do with the size of the person. It has to do, or it doesn't have to do with the body type. It has to do with the way they carry it.
Mm-hmm. They're either comfortable with it or they're not.
Yes. It's interesting that some people can style a fur like it's just natural, and others of it's just like somebody threw a rug on you.
Did you mean to walk out of the house like that? Is that couch missing its throw? All right.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the questions. What's one thing you did less of in 2020 that you realize you probably don't need?
Socialize.
My husband is slightly antisocial, so this has been a wonderful time for him because he gets to tell people, get the fuck away from me.
Man after my very own heart. I used to spend a whole lot of time being utterly fabulous, or trying to be utterly fabulous, and that meant, all the acquaintances and the lunches, the dinners, the this,
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll see you at this, and I'll see you at that, and we'll meet at that, and we'll do all that,
all the social calendar, yes,
all that faggoty stuff that we all do, so that we can run away from those high school years when we were alone and ostracized and marginalized, and nobody loved us because we were homosexual, and so we're trying to overcompensate for that, or at least I was trying by being terribly popular all the time and being a little butterfly, as I said, utterly fabulous. Okay, well, I'm 60 now, and so, or will be in August, and to be completely honest. And so a lot of that, the pandemic just accelerated that like, okay, enough. And so I am very much aware that I have a lot of acquaintances, a lot of them, and a wonderful group, a very small, tiny, select group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with longevity. It has to do with just connection.
Right.
An example I can give you is that there's a lesbian who works in my basement. She is an artist, and she and I were talking. We were conceptualizing a project that I'm working on in the house, a two-dimensional project. And I said to her, "Can this element be printed on newsprint? And how would it look if it were pasted badly?" And she said, "Oh, like crappy wheat plates? It would look fabulous. I think you can do that in an instant. Put it in the toaster, put it in the oven, and toast it a little bit so it crumbles, and it'll be fine." And so it was that experience of absolutely falling on the wavelength instantly with someone that I have only known maybe 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But I have that. But there again, there's that connection.
The connection is deeper than
is deeper than the boys at the baths that night.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
They speak your lingo.
Well, both parties do, but one of them is a deeper.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. They get you and you get them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, what makes you feel motivated, inspired, and excited?
Another creative, like The Lesbian in the Basement, or like my editor.
You need to write the next book called The Lesbian in the Basement. I'm sorry. That's just begging for a book.
Yes, but you could do so much with that.
I know, exactly.
Where
That's
do you
exactly
start?
my point. Yeah.
But where do you start? It is Cincinnati, Ohio is not Dallas, Texas. And I've lived here for 10 years and I love Cincinnati, Ohio. I love, there are many, many things to love about Cincinnati, Ohio. But the fluidity of conversation, just like what we're having over Zoom now, is it's just not that way. I mean, they are Cincinnatians are very reserved people, and so they don't have this kind of instant rapport. Thank you. So when I have an opportunity to talk to another creative like The Lesbian in the Basement, or my editor, who is a wonderful man, who I finally taught myself his language, it inspires me even more. And an example of that was that I had sent him the proposal for my next book, which is not The Lesbian in the Basement, by the way. And he didn't like it. And he told me he didn't like it. And I agreed to it with him. What he didn't like about it was that it was not a book. It was a curated set of notes. And his main critique was, you have done an enormous amount of work in creating your notes, but I can't find the story. You have to tell, where's the story in this? And so the other day, that was a year ago, that was about 6 months ago. And the other day I was out to pick up some books, and he stopped me, and we talked in the rain and the drizzle about what's going to happen next with this. And I thought, and my point was, you didn't seem terribly interested in it. I'm not interested in it if you're not interested in it. So I kind of let it go on the back burner. And he said, let's look at that again. And we talked for a good hour and maybe an hour and a half in the rain and the drizzle and the COVID about what to do next. And have I found the story yet? No, but the impetus for finding the story is able to have that kind of a conversation with him again. Because without a manuscript, we have no relationship. Without something to talk about, there is nothing other than, are you happy? Are you healthy? Yes. Okay. So am I. That's the end of the call.
Right.
So so what gets me excited is some creative project that I don't want to collaborate with anybody, because I'm very much of a solo act. But I do want, ask Dale, but I do want.
Stay tuned for next week's episode.
Right. But I do like to have
his NPR voice,
which is a very good NPR voice. So that's what gets me excited, is to be able to talk about creatively that is a little bit deeper than I love the way you use the word "is" in the sentence. That's from my book club, my writers group. The two critiques from my writers group are, "That's lovely, dear," and I love the way you used "is" in the sentence.
Well, if you ever write a book about writing, that's your title right there.
Well, okay. Let me give you another example. You can edit in or out. I was Wayne Goodman from Queer Words podcast.
Well,
has been your guest.
Yeah.
And so
I'm in a writers group with him. So yes.
Okay. Well, I'm supposed to be in that writers group too. I'm a member, but I don't attend because A, I'm not working on anything. B, I'm supposed to be working on something, and joining a writers group makes me conscientious that I'm not working on what I should be working on. And third, it's at a very peculiar hour in Eastern time. It's right. Great if you're in Pacific time, but I need to go see you guys. I want to go see you guys. So I'm doing a podcast with Wayne Goodman, and the bio that he chose had to do with how I got into writing, which had to do with my grandparents traveled a lot. And they sent me postcards and letters. But in order for me to get those postcards or letters, I had to reciprocate. So here I am, 6 and 7 years old with, I went to school, I had lunch, I came home. and having to make that somehow interesting to them. And he was fascinated by it. He said, that is a wonderful story. I want to write that story. Can I write that story? And I thought to myself, dude, it's on my website. You can pick it up and take it, because he wasn't wanting to write my story. He just wanted to have that idea of a kid having
to make his life
correspond. And he sent me the treatment, and it really is quite good. It really is quite wonderful. It isn't at all my experience, but it's that kind of interaction with other creatives where you can say, okay, here's this, I think it's a trite little piece of nothing information. And Wayne has taken off to make it a short story, maybe even a novella. That's what really gets me excited.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, what 3 words describe you best?
Depends on who you ask. If you're asking me,
yes, you.
Yes,
engaging, articulate, and smart, but that can just as easily be obnoxious, boorish, conceited, and arrogant. Depends on who you ask.
So I'm assuming conceited and arrogant is a hyphenated word.
It is. It is. And for emphasis, you ditch the hyphenation and you just capitalized arrogant.
Right. Okay. There you go. All right.
Because people who know that word, those 2 words go together, know that those 2 words go together. And people who don't know, don't know.
Right. Okay. There you go. Well, what's your proudest accomplishment?
34 years of marriage to Dale Harris.
There you go.
But I had some incentive. When the relationship had gotten to the point where I either had to commit or not, we all have been there. I did not have great role models for marriage from my parents. And so I went to the next generation back, which was my grandparents. And my grandmother was married to a difficult man for 75 years and adored him, and he adored her, but he was difficult. And so I asked my grandmother to dinner, and she suggested a restaurant in her residential hotel, which I hate because it requires a jacket, and I don't like eating in my jacket. And she adores it because this is where all her little old lady friends go and have their dinners. And so she wants a table in the middle of the room so that all of her little old bitty friends can see that her grandson loves her enough to come have dinner with her in his jacket. Right? Okay. And I want to talk about intimate things, not in the center of a restaurant, but that's all right. It's my grandmother. She's 96 at the time. And so I asked my grandmother, I said, Nanny, how do you know this is the one? She was not real excited about my sexual choice, about my lifestyle choice. But she was the first one to accept it. She never liked it. And she gave me 3 tests, but she finally said to me, she gave me the 3 tests that she used for her husband. And then she takes this big piece of pork chop, she shoves it in the corner of her mouth between her dentures and her lip, her cheek, and she says, but Alexander, the fact that you have found anyone that will live with you is an accomplishment you must not discount. And so it kind of has been, if Granny said it, then that pretty much is the incentive to keep going.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, last question. What's the most daring thing you've ever done?
That question is it depends on context.
You get to choose.
Okay. Well, the most daring thing I ever did was I took over my mother's design showroom when it was absolutely bankrupt, in shambles. It was my legacy. It was what she had left me, and it was nothing. It had 5 times more liabilities than it did assets. And everybody, all of my advisors had told me there was nothing there, beach it. There's nothing going to happen. This is dead. Just call the sheriff, have the lock put on. It's over. And Dale knew how to read a balance sheet, and we had been together for 3 years. And so we decided together just to give it a shot. There's nothing to lose. These aren't my debts. I mean, yes, I'm responsible for the repayment if that's what I choose to do, but it's not due to my mismanagement that they happened.
Right.
My parents ran that business into the ground on alcohol. And so we pursued it. And in 3 years, we turned around and sold it, and got it viable and turned around and sold it because I thought that my legacy and my life ambition was to carry on my mother's reputation And after 3 years, I thought, no, 3 years in a lifetime of childhood. I thought, no, A, I don't have the temperament for it. B, I don't have the talent for it. But I did have the talent for putting it back together and making it viable again. And so we did that. If I knew then what I know now, I would have said, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Not, yes, it was a wonderful experience, and I'm glad that I did it in hindsight. But in context of today, right now, oh, fuck it.
Right.
Well, there you go. You made it through the list.
I did.
Yay!
So you've hinted at another book on the horizon. Is that your next big project? Do you guys have any
Yes,
more trips
my
planned?
next big project is a book, because Mother figures so vividly in River Queens, because River Queens would not have been possible without her example. One of Mother's driving sayings, we all had mothers who had these sayings: don't touch your brother, or stop hitting your brother. But one of Mother's was, you never regret the failures in life, only the opportunities you let slip by.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has urged me to take chances and do things because I didn't want to live with the regret of not.
Mm-hmm.
And River Queens, one of the things I get the most feedback about River Queens is my mother. And readers want to know about Vivian, and they want to know what it was like to live with Vivian, and so on and so forth. And Vivian was a creative, and Vivian was alcoholic, and one of our very best friends said about my mother, Vivian had more than her demons to fight, her dragons to fight. And the challenge with writing a book about Mother is not a lack of material. The challenge of writing about Mother is that it is so cliche. A fag and his mother, or I don't want to write Auntie Mame again, it's already been written, or A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, or I Remember Mama. I mean, nobody wants to, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems with the manuscript I've written for that book is the same problem River Queens had in the early going. And that's where my editor was so helpful, because in River Queens, John said, Alexander, no one gives a shit about two guys on a river. Nobody. What we have to do is make them care about the two guys. And the same is true about Vivian Watson. Anybody who's interested in a book about Vivian Watson is all dead, because it's all her peers. So what I have is a wonderful backlog of some really interesting stories that involve some really interesting characters, because this was a decorative arts in Dallas, Texas before HGTV.
Right.
So it's a wonderful, there's a wonderful story in there, but therein lies the problem. No one cares about Vivian Watson. We have to make them care about the woman who was Vivian Watson, or a woman who was Vivian Watson, who gets us, and that gets us back to the film about the women. Nobody, in its essence, none of us care about those women. We don't really care. What we care about is how those women interacted.
Right.
Okay.
And then the conversation was always about the men in their lives.
Exactly. So that
you never
is something.
See a man, but that was the focus the entire time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so this River Queen isn't really about two guys in a boat. It's about the people one meets when one leaves one's home base. What lays out beyond familiarity and routine? Here it is, and that's something we can all think about and we can all imagine. I never intended for people to have my river trip or my and Dale river trip. What I wanted them to have, River Queens, is a river trip. Here's what it's like to just here it is, to sail off into the sunset, to throw it all away and just go. Here's what can happen. Similarly, what the book about Mother would be, the story that's developing out of that is, if you got away from the daily dues, if you got away from changing the cat box and paying the rent and all those things that we all have to do, and concentrated on making a very beautiful home, what would that be like? because we all, particularly now, we all have HGTV, and so we all see kind of how that works as far as the way HGTV presents it.
Right.
But what if you hired a designer and the budget really wasn't a problem and you could just do that? What would that be like? That's the story. And so the book about mom really isn't about mom at all. It just happens to be the resource I have to create that story.
Right. All right. Are you going to do any other online events or?
Actually, I have I'm working on an in-person gig, the first in-person gig in a
Wow,
long time.
yay.
I'm looking forward to talking at the Legacy of the Lakes Museum and Gardens in Alexandria, Minnesota. We're still negotiating for a date, but I hope to be able to do that this summer. It's the first invitation for in-person that I've had since the pandemic.
Right.
And then Wayne Goodman has we've recorded, and Wayne is like on a 4-month timeline. So I expect to be on Wayne Goodman's Queer Words podcast in June.
Very nice. All right. Well, where's the best place for people to get the dates and times as you have them? Your website, one of the
My
social
website,
links?
which is www.riverqueens.us.
Perfect. All right. Any final words of wisdom? Anything goes.
I see those.
Just to reiterate what my mother said, you never regret the failures, only the opportunities you let go by.
Yep.
Amen. All right, folks, this was Written on the Edge. The Rogue Podcast is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roguepodcast.com. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Alexander Watson for being with us. Alexander, thank you so much.
It's been a lovely morning. Thank you for inviting me.
It's been our pleasure.
Yeah, totally.
Now, pick up River Queens and enjoy the story that unfolds, because I don't know if you're ready to step outside your own comfort zone yet, so give it a try. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.